Joel Osteen stood at the pinnacle of American religious influence, commanding one of the nation's largest congregations from the gleaming confines of a former basketball arena in Houston, Texas. For more than 2 decades, he delivered a consistent message wrapped in optimism, promise, and the assurance that God wanted his followers to prosper and succeed. His smile became as iconic as his theology, perpetually present, eternally confident, seemingly impervious to criticism or contradiction. Yet beneath the polished exterior of this megachurch empire, cracks had been forming for years, growing wider with each passing scandal, each unanswered question, and each moment when his carefully constructed narrative collided with inconvenient reality. The journey that brought Joel Osteen to such prominence began not with him, but with his father, John Osteen, a man whose own spiritual evolution would shape everything that followed. Born in 1921 in Paris, Texas, John Osteen transformed himself from a small-town Baptist minister into a charismatic pioneer of a different kind of Christianity altogether. His credentials were impressive: a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and eventually a doctorate of divinity. But it was a personal crisis that fundamentally altered his theological trajectory. When his infant daughter Lisa was born with a condition resembling cerebral palsy, John experienced what he described as a baptism of the Holy Ghost. This moment of spiritual renewal led him to embrace charismatic Christianity and abandon the denominational structures that had previously defined his ministry. On Mother's Day 1959, John founded Lakewood Church in an abandoned feed store on the outskirts of Houston. What began with 90 worshipers would eventually become the largest church in America. The growth was steady, methodical, and impressive. By the time John prepared to step aside, he had built something extraordinary: a thriving congregation, a burgeoning television ministry, and a family legacy that seemed destined for continued expansion. Yet John never envisioned that his reluctant youngest son would be the one to take it to unprecedented heights. Joel Osteen was not groomed to be his father's successor. Unlike many children of prominent ministers, Joel showed little inclination toward the pulpit. He attended Oral Roberts University to study communications, but dropped out after just 1 semester to return to Houston and help with the television ministry. For nearly 2 decades, from 1982 to 1999, Joel remained behind the scenes, producing broadcasts, managing equipment, and steadfastly refusing the repeated invitations to preach. He was content in obscurity, comfortable with anonymity, seemingly destined for a life supporting rather than leading. Everything changed in January 1999 when John Osteen's health began to deteriorate. Once again, John asked his son to preach. Once again, Joel said no. But this time, something shifted. Minutes after declining, Joel called back and agreed. On January 17, 1999, at 35 years old and wearing his father's shoes for emotional support, Joel preached his first sermon to approximately 6,000 people. John listened from his hospital bed, reportedly beaming with pride. 6 days later, John was dead, and Joel was forced to confront a reality he had spent decades avoiding. He was now the pastor of Lakewood Church. The early months were uncertain. Joel attempted to replicate his father's style, mirroring the fire and intensity that had characterized John's ministry. It didn't work. But gradually, something clicked. Joel found his own voice, one built not on hellfire and damnation, but on positivity, motivation, and relentless hope. He discovered a niche in American Christianity that was hungry for exactly this message. God is nice, you're nice, be nice. This wasn't the Christianity of struggle and sacrifice that had dominated American Protestant theology for centuries. This was a new gospel for a new age, optimized for comfort and success. Under Joel's leadership, Lakewood experienced explosive growth. The existing sanctuary could no longer contain the crowds. In 2005, Lakewood relocated to the Compact Center, a 16,800-seat former basketball arena, following an elaborate financial arrangement with the city of Houston. The transformation was complete. Joel had turned his father's ministry into a genuine megachurch phenomenon. Weekly attendance surged past 50,000. His television broadcasts reached an estimated 100 million households across America and more than 100 countries worldwide. His books, starting with Your Best Life Now in 2004, became bestsellers, with some advance contracts reportedly worth tens of millions of dollars. The financial success translated into personal wealth. In 2005, Joel announced that he would no longer accept a salary from Lakewood Church, instead supporting his lifestyle through book royalties, speaking fees allegedly reaching $50,000 per appearance, and other media ventures. This move was brilliant public relations. It allowed him to claim that he had transcended the prosperity gospel accusations while simultaneously becoming extraordinarily wealthy through his secular enterprises. His personal fortune has been estimated at over $100 million, though exact figures remain difficult to verify. His real estate holdings are more concrete. A 17,000-square-foot mansion purchased in Houston's exclusive River Oaks neighborhood for $10.5 million, valued today between $14 and $16 million. Yet, as his wealth and influence grew, so did the controversies. In 2005, Joel appeared on Larry King Live and famously avoided a direct answer about salvation and non-Christians. When asked whether Jews and Muslims were condemned, he deflected, speaking vaguely about his travels and the sincerity of non-Christian believers. The backlash was immediate and intense, forcing Joel to issue a public apology 5 days later. But the damage had been done. Critics who had long questioned the theological foundation of his ministry now had concrete evidence of what they considered evasion, or worse, a fundamental departure from Christian orthodoxy. The theological criticisms intensified from serious scholars and theologians. Michael Horton, a theology professor at Westminster Seminary, famously called it cotton candy gospel, arguing that Osteen handled Scripture like fortune cookies, extracting cheerful promises while ignoring the deeper, more challenging biblical narrative. John MacArthur launched even more scathing attacks, calling Osteen a pagan religionist, and suggesting that his entire ministry was fundamentally antithetical to authentic Christianity. These criticisms found audiences among theologically minded believers, but they barely dented Osteen's mainstream popularity. His followers loved the message of hope. They were not interested in existential theological debates. What did damage his image, however, was a series of increasingly bizarre and troubling incidents that suggested the carefully maintained facade was beginning to crack. In 2005, his wife Victoria became involved in an altercation on an airplane that was far more serious than the initial headline suggested. During a flight to Colorado, Victoria demanded that a flight attendant clean an armrest. When the attendant refused to meet her expectations, Victoria allegedly pushed and elbowed her, leading to an FAA investigation and a $3,000 fine. Victoria later sued the flight attendant, but a jury ruled against her, a rare moment of public accountability that did not sit well with Osteen's image of propriety and grace. Then, in 2017, Hurricane Harvey devastated Houston with over 60 inches of rain in some areas. Lakewood Church initially announced on Facebook that it was inaccessible due to flooding and directed displaced residents elsewhere. But as social media quickly revealed, the building appeared to be relatively dry and accessible. The optics were catastrophic. While Mattress Mac, a Houston furniture store owner, was opening his stores to evacuees and sending trucks to rescue stranded families, Joel Osteen was defending why his 16,000-seat church had not immediately opened its doors. His television appearance on the Today Show, where he claimed that opening the shelter would not have been a good story if the building had flooded, struck many observers as deeply tone-deaf and self-centered. The hurricane controversy was damaging, but it paled in comparison to what was discovered in a church bathroom wall. In March 2014, Lakewood had reported a theft of approximately $600,000 in cash and checks from the church safe. The case went unsolved, and the money was written off as an insured loss. 7 years later, in November 2021, a plumber named Justin Colley was repairing a loose toilet when approximately 500 envelopes suddenly fell from the wall cavity. The envelopes contained cash, checks, and money orders. The missing $600,000 that had vanished in 2014. How the money ended up in a bathroom wall remains unexplained. Lakewood's explanation that someone may have tossed the bags intending to retrieve them later stretches credibility, But without security cameras in that bathroom at the time, the truth may never be known. Perhaps most damaging to Osteen's carefully cultivated image of Christian charity was Lakewood's acceptance of Paycheck Protection Program funds during the COVID-19 pandemic. In July 2020, as churches remained closed and in-person services were suspended, Lakewood applied for and received $4.4 million in PPP loans, the third largest in the Houston area. This decision ignited a firestorm of criticism across social media. How could one of the largest, wealthiest churches in America accept millions in pandemic relief funds designed to help struggling small businesses? Lakewood defended the move by explaining that the church used the money to maintain full salaries and benefits for its employees. Eventually, under sustained pressure, the church repaid the full amount, but the decision revealed how willing Osteen's organization was to take public funds, even when it seemed ethically questionable. Then came the moment that transcended controversy and entered genuine tragedy. On February 11, 2024, during services at Lakewood Church, a woman named Janesse Moreno entered the building carrying an AR-15 style rifle marked with a Palestine sticker. She confronted a security guard, moved into a hallway, and opened fire. Two off-duty law enforcement officers working church security responded and killed the shooter, but not before Moreno's 7-year-old son, Samuel, was shot in the head. The child underwent 5 brain surgeries, had part of his frontal lobe removed, and had half of his skull surgically removed. Doctors informed the family that their son would never be the same again, a tragedy of unimaginable proportions. In the immediate aftermath, Joel issued statements expressing devastation, but critics noted that his focus seemed primarily on Lakewood itself, rather than on the broader implications of the violence. The shooter had documented mental health issues and had been able to legally purchase the rifle despite her history of schizophrenia and prior mental health interventions. The tragedy exposed uncomfortable questions about gun access, mental health policy, and the responsibility of institutions with resources to do more than offer prayers. As these incidents accumulated, the theological critiques, the financial controversies, the personal embarrassments, the hurricane disaster, the mysterious wall money, the PPP loan scandal, and finally the shooting, a narrative began to emerge that contradicted everything Joel Osteen had built his career upon. His message of hope rang increasingly hollow in a world where his own actions seemed motivated by self-interest, financial gain, and image management rather than genuine spiritual conviction. His smile, once a symbol of faith and optimism, began to appear calculated and defensive. The final reckoning is not one dramatic event, but rather the accumulation of contradictions, finally becoming impossible to ignore. Joel Osteen built the largest church in America on a message that God rewards the faithful with health, wealth, and success. Yet his pursuit of wealth and success seemed to contradict the selflessness that his message supposedly inspired. He claimed to serve a gospel of hope, yet his actions often revealed someone more concerned with protecting his reputation than addressing genuine human suffering. The sentence may not come from courts or governing bodies. Joel Osteen likely faces no legal consequences for most of his actions, but the sentence is already being written in the court of public opinion, in the shifting attitudes of his followers, and in the permanence of digital records that preserve every contradiction, every evasion, every moment when his carefully maintained image cracked under pressure. His legacy, once seemingly destined to define American Christianity for generations, now appears more fragile and contingent than it once did. For Joel Osteen, the smile that served him so well for 25 years may no longer be sufficient. The walls are closing in not through prosecution or regulation, but through the slow, relentless erosion of credibility. The goodbye that awaits him may not be the dramatic exit of a fallen televangelist, but rather a gradual fading from the cultural prominence he once commanded. That may ultimately be the more fitting conclusion to a story built on the promise of transcendence, but undermined by the all-too-human failures of its central figure. Like, subscribe, and follow for more.